Welcome to the Visiting Writers Reading Series. This is an event that is sponsored by the College of Arts and Sciences and by the English department. And today our guest is Micah Hicks. Now, we have a few books here for students who are not creative writing students, or maybe we're not in my classes this semester, and these are free books for you that Micah just nicely, gave us, contributed. I first met Micah Hicks after his reading at last year's Louisville Conference on Literature and Culture since 1900. He had just won the Calvino Prize, and I was lucky to be in the audience because, like many other people, I was mesmerized by his work. And so I want to share with you a couple of short blurbs written for Electricity and Other Dreams. Micah Hicks is like a southern oracle, spouting true and fantastic magic with the spirit of the place rumbling through his voice. Or, in a short biography, Hicks is referred to as an author of magical realism, modern fairy tales, and other kinds of magical stories, but no label fits. There is no one writing like him. Micah Hicks is a Calvino Prize winning author of fabulous fiction. His work has appeared in places like Witness, New Letters, Indiana Review, New Orleans Review, and Baltimore Review. His story collection, Electricity and Other Dreams, was recently published by New American Press and received a starred review from Publishers Weekly. He received his PhD at Florida State University, focusing on creative writing and fairy tales, and currently he teaches creative writing at Arkansas Tech University. So please join me in welcoming.
Oh, thank you all so much for coming. Especially those of you who've already dealt with me once today and are now back for more. It's really awesome. So I'm going to read, I usually like reading new work. I'm going to read one from the collection, a very short one called Watermelon Seeds. And then I'm going to read two new pieces, and I'll talk more about the pieces are in conversation with the lecture on characterization I gave today. So I'll say a few very quick things about that, but we'll go ahead and start with the first story. Down round the old lake houses, lake people like to eat watermelon. In their tin-bottom boats sliding over the lake weeds, in dirt yards with dogs slapping tails against legs, on the porches with red juice sticky dripping over fingers and reddening everything. Through the kitchen window, Grandpa laughs from the gut, says, "Don't feed them babies no watermelon seeds or they'll grow vines out their ears." Little Dino cries and asks, "Is it true, Mama? Is it true, Mama?" Mama listens to the headphone hiss shaking her ears, the slide and pop of bubble gum in her cheek. She snips off watermelon chunks with tick bird beak fingernails and drops them into Dino's mouth. Little Dino gums the melon meat and dribbles seeds down his chin. He cries, "Mama, I swallowed one. Mama, I swallowed one." And Grandpa shakes his guts with both hands and laughs in the kitchen. Mama goes to work and Grandpa puts Dino on his lap, digs in the boy's ear with fingers black from engine oil. "I feel them vines a-comin', little baby," he says. "I feel them vines a-comin'." Dino cries and bites his granddaddy's hairy arm. That night in bed, Dino dreams of flowers blooming, while vines unfurl in his skull and come falling from his head. They push out of his ears, his nose, his mouth. Dino's head is a tangle of watermelon vines. In the morning, Dino can see nothing, hear nothing, speak nothing. He runs through the house, rustling his yellow-flowered head, and breaks the TV. Mama spanks him so hard that she spits her gum on the floor. She leaves to get a new television. Grandpa changes Dino's diaper and finds watermelon juice inside, pooled like blood between his legs. Grandpa takes Dino outside and digs a hole behind the house. He drops the boy inside, mashes him down with a hairy foot until only the vines show, takes a slow piss on the mound and hums, "Grow, little baby Dino, grow." That summer, Dino becomes root lying like leather in the dirt. His tiny hairs braid into vines that rise and break the gravel around the house. Grandpa's old shack is an island in a lake of watermelon vines, and he laughs and laughs and laughs. Watermelons come hatching from the patch, their sloped sides like ship's hulls breaking water, and Grandpa gathers them into an old wagon, sells them for $5 on the side of the road. Mama gets heartsick for little Dino now, forgets about broken TVs, seeds in diapers, and ear-aching mama cries, takes an old shovel and tears apart the patch until she pulls her baby up like a potato, yanks all the vines and roots off, cleans him pink with the hose. The wind and sun hurt his vegetable skin, and little Dino bawls like a newborn in Mama's arms. On the roadside, Grandpa makes a killing, new checkered shirts and no more engine grease on his fingers. He breaks a watermelon over his knee to show somebody, a melon-red fetus curled up inside the rind. "Don't swallow them bones," Grandpa laughs. "I don't know what would happen if you swallowed them bones." So that's the first one. Thanks. So a couple of very quick comments on this story. I don't want to take up too much time with this, but the watermelon, people are, I've been asked before, like, why watermelons? And I grew up in Hope, Arkansas, which I think fancies itself the watermelon capital of the world, which surely it's not, because what is Hope, Arkansas, the capital of? But it, like we had a watermelon festival every year, and ate lots of watermelon growing up. And then the story, if you swallow watermelon seeds, vines will grow out your ears, is something my grandfather told me, and probably many of your grandfathers told you, because grandfathers are horrible people. But the next two stories I'm going to read, they're both newer, they're not in the collection. One is written in the kind of fairy tale style where character doesn't matter so much, or character is not very deep. So the characters just kind of do things. They're more like actions or one note. You know, they're more silhouettes than complicated people. Whereas the next story I'm going to read is going to be much more a character-driven story told in the voice of these people. And so I think in terms of the lecture I gave today, the craft talk on character and how to do character well and how it can affect stories, it'll be interesting to see the difference because the stories are both magical. They both deal with like mythological creatures. But they sound completely different and they come off a little different. So it'll be fun to hear what you guys think about that. So the first one is called Song Beneath the City. For decades, the four plumbers had answered the call of old widows who dropped jewelry down their drains. Sometimes the plumbers unscrewed the U-shaped trap under the sink, knocked out its splat of tobacco-colored crud, and fished out a golden ring. But other times there was no reclaiming the lost diamonds and gold. The jewelry had tumbled blind through the maze of pipes below the city, never to see the sun again. Whenever the plumbers left a house, the widows would ask, "Do you hear it too, the singing that comes rattling up from the pipes?" The question made them uncomfortable. They knew pipes, their rust and fittings, their wet metal smell and black oozings. But in all their years, they had never heard a pipe sing, only gurgle or wetly retch. The plumbers kept an index of everything that had been lost down the drains. Coins, diamonds, earrings, rings by the hundreds, bullets promised for enemies, the occasional tooth. By the plumber's tally, millions of dollars had made their way through the pipes, slowly tumbling down through the earth to the lowest reaches of the city. They planned for years, looking at maps of the city's sewer system, touring its waste treatment systems, making secret forays into subterranean construction sites. The city had been burned down and rebuilt in layers, and centuries of pipe were linked together beneath. Who could say how deep the water fell? They decided to find out. The plumbers attired themselves like astronauts. They wore headlamps, breathing masks, rubber boots, and gloves. They brought compasses, Chinese dictionaries, football pads. One of the plumbers, not knowing how long they would be gone, brought a winter coat. "It will be like another planet," one said. "There will be dangers. Curtains of black mold that colonize the lungs, pockets of burning gas, fields of shit writhing with rats, snotty orbs of fungus. To fall will be to die." "And what of the creatures?" said another. "The blind scum gators, the drain snakes, the metal-mouthed centipedes." "And the people," said another, "every sad, angry, abandoned person carried down here by the rain while no one noticed." "We can't even imagine what it will be like," said the fourth and youngest plumber. "It will defy our every expectation." They followed the subway rails, snapped open a locked tunnel with bolt cutters, and ventured into the dark. The sounds of the city, its honking and shouting, laugh of water tumbling from faucets, roar of thousands of flushing toilets, faded until they could hear only their alternating heartbeats. They listened to their four hearts, and their hearts said, want, 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 hope. The older three chuckled at the fourth's naive, hopeful heart. Beneath an ancient and abandoned wastewater treatment plant, they found huge sewage tunnels that ran through the city like bones. The plumbers broke open a rusty access door and climbed inside, the black water flowing hot and thick around their legs. The smell made them choke, and the darkness here was thicker than any they had ever seen. They dropped into it, following the tunnels down, 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 to the very bottom where every heavy thing came to rest. The pipe opened into a natural cavern. There was light here, and their eyes stung. Not the murky yellow of city lights or the sharp blade of office lights, but sunlight, warm and red as blood. How it got there, under miles of earth and pipe and water, the plumbers did not know, but they imagined it too had tumbled down the drains in small golden pieces until it piled here. Out of the light and dense black soil, trees grew, pressing against the high roof of the cavern and curling along its rounded ceiling. Leaves and flowers fell into a clear pool in the middle of the cave. The plumbers heard a low, sad singing echoing over the water. This was the song the widows had told them about, and the plumbers realized it had always been with them, faint under the ringing of their hammers and scrape of their pliers. In the pool, 4 mermaids with silver scales swam and sang. They were laden with gold and silver, had rings on every finger, bracelets up their arms, their ears pierced 16 times. Their hair, black and long, was heavy, plated with diamonds and gold. The plumber's 4 hearts pounded, want, 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 hope. How did you get here? One of the plumbers asked. There was once a channel that flowed under the city from the sea, a mermaid said. We swam here looking for treasure when we were young, but the people above drilled and poured concrete, and the tunnel closed behind us. Can you take us back to the sea? One of the mermaids asked. We miss the open water. Of course, said one of the plumbers, promising too quickly and smiling at the others. Of course we will. Each of the men hoisted a gold-heavy mermaid from the water, careful not to bruise her tail, and carried her out of the cavern. I told you, the youngest plumber said. It defied our every expectation. We expected treasure, said one of the others, and treasure is what we found. As they climbed through the earth, the noises of the city became louder. Honking cars, crying children, the lip-tripping speed of advertisements, and the patter of lie on lie falling. That doesn't sound like the ocean, said one of the mermaids, her hair rattling with gold. It's very close, said one of the plumbers. I can almost hear it. They carried the mermaids into the gray city above. There was no water here, only dry brick and concrete, heat rising from the asphalt. The plumbers each took a mermaid back to his apartment, 10 stories above the ground, and put her in his bathtub. Where are my sisters? Where is the sea? The plumbers brought them telephones to call their sisters and cans of chopped tuna. They opened their windows so the mermaids could see the city far below, and then the plumbers sat down in their toilets to stare at the mermaids' naked, captive beauty. When will we go to the ocean? Asked each of the mermaids, every day, as days turned into weeks. Tomorrow, if the weather is good, said each of the plumbers, every day, as months turned into years. The plumbers sold the mermaids' jewelry, quitting their jobs and shutting themselves away in their bathrooms. They were mesmerized by silver scales, seaweed dark hair, luminescent yellow eyes like lamps burning under the water. The 3 older plumbers climbed into the bath and sat behind the mermaids, plaiting their hair and massaging their slick skin with rough, hairy hands. The mermaids' long tails hung out of the tub, their fins growing brittle in the air. The plumbers kissed their necks and ran their hands over their scales, and the mermaids sang their sad song. When 3 of the mermaids gave birth to daughters, babies with slim legs, webbed fingers and toes, the same dark hair and glowing eyes, the plumbers asked, "Do you love me yet?" The mermaids answered, "If I say yes, will you let me go?" The youngest plumber did not touch the mermaid he had brought home. Rarely did he speak with her. He would go into the bathroom to pee, and turning to her, he would ask, "Do you need anything?" "Let me and my sisters go," she would say. The young plumber explained that he was trying, but the older plumbers didn't want to give the mermaids up no matter what he said. "What can I do?" he asked. Go away, she told him. That would be the very least. For years, he cleaned himself with a washcloth at the kitchen sink. At night, he lay in his bed and listened to the mermaid on the phone with her sisters, singing in the small bathroom, her voice rising in one long sob. There was a storm. Rain and ocean surge covered the streets with water, and the radio told people to stay inside. The old widows called the plumbers, complaining that water was backing up into their sinks, filling their basements, flooding their lawns. The plumbers said, "We're out of the business. Call someone else." The four mermaids hauled themselves up to the small window and watched the city fill with water until asphalt vanished and the buildings rose like spars of island or reef. The mermaids wept and called one another. "Can you see it?" they asked. "The sea has come." Their daughters peered down at the water through their mother's thick hair. It was like the sky had come down to meet the earth, everything open and wide. They felt their mother's longing for space. "If you jumped, you would die," the three older plumbers said, their arms like chains around the mermaids' waists. In his apartment, the youngest plumber could see that the mermaid was preparing to jump, to throw her body down 10 stories into a few inches of water. She would die and become only a memory, like the sea in her mind. "It isn't deep enough," he told her. "Not yet." She looked at him for a long time, and the plumber felt small and ugly under her eyes. Finally, she said, "There is something you can do for me." The plumber took the elevator down, fought the wind and water in the parking lot to get to his truck, and found a rusted pipe wrench and hammer. He drove through the flooded streets in his tall truck, breaking fire hydrants open one by one, all the way from the ocean to the apartment building. The hydrants opened their red mouths and spewed free the city's water. The four mermaids watched the water rising and whispered to each other on their phones. Their children ran over the bathroom tile, slender and quick as fish, begging to go play in the storm. "No one is going outside," the plumber said. "Without you, what would we be? Only plumbers." When the fourth plumber came back, the mermaids said into the phone receiver, "Now." The mermaids turned to the plumbers, opened their arms, and said, "I'm afraid." The four plumbers rushed into their arms, their slippery, soft skin, the damp hair lying over their shoulders. The youngest plumber cried into his mermaid's hair, telling her that he was sorry. Their hearts throbbed, want, 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 hope. The four mermaids flicked their muscular tails and flung themselves from their windows, carrying the plumbers with them. They fell through the open sky, spreading their arms and straightening their spines like they hadn't in years. This was what swimming in the sea felt like. The water rushed up to meet them, and they turned their faces to it. The 8 of them crashed into the water, the plumbers clinging to the mermaids. 3 of the plumbers pulled the mermaids' hair and climbed their shoulders, fighting to get up for air. The mermaids rolled in the water, pressing the plumbers' hairy faces to the wet road, holding them beneath until they were filled with it. The mermaids' daughters dropped down from the sky, knifing through the water with their tiny bodies and grinning at the lightning flashing across their faces. The current swept them down the street, and they linked hands so that they wouldn't lose one another. The youngest plumber fell with his mermaid and went limp with sorrow. She held him close under the water, looking at him with her lantern eyes and bringing him just to the edge of drowning. His heart sent its message through the water, and she heard it for the first time. Angry and sad at all the years he'd taken from her, the mermaid flung him into the branches of a fallen tree under the water. With dolphin leaps, she flew down the street to join her sisters, rushing into the arms of the ocean. The youngest plumber clutched the branches and struggled up for air while the wind battered him. He shouted through the storm for the mermaid to come back, but she was gone, and his voice was small against rain and wind. Looking for her silver tail, her river of hair, he saw instead the mermaid's daughters clasping their webbed hands, struggling in the current. Before he could reach them, the girls were swept into a storm drain, vanishing through the pipes and falling toward the bottom of the city. The last plumber turned away from the chortling thunder. He fell and let the current push him into the sewers with every other lost thing. He went deep into the dark, pushing through mud and shit and rats, calling out for the lost girls. But the city was big, the pipes roared loud, and he didn't know any of their names. For years, a group of old widows had listened to singing echo up through their pipes. They held phone receivers to their sink drains, asking each other, "Do you hear it?" And when the widows dialed up their hearing aids, they could. They'd called plumbers, hoping to understand, but the plumbers told them there was no song beneath the city. Unable to stand the mystery any longer, they raided their closets for flashlight and batteries, worn hiking boots, their dead husbands' walking canes. They put on their strongest prescription eyeglasses and went into the sewers, blushing at no trespassing signs and pressing forward. After a long time, they reached the bottom of the city. Here they found a grove of trees in a sunlit cavern. It was fall and the trees had turned a bloody orange, their leaves covering a deep pool. In the pool, the three young girls swam and splashed, kicking their finned legs. On the bank, a bearded and filth-covered man slept near them. "Is it you?" a widow asked, singing the sad song that echoes through our pipes. The girls shook their heads. "Sorry, we don't sing, but the plumber does. Every night, the same sad song." The widows nodded and sat on the grass. "That's too bad. We had hoped it was our husbands' ghosts singing their love for us." They watched the sunlight in the cavern dim. The girls grew quiet and the plumber stirred, rising on the bank and blinking his rheumy eyes. The widows turned up their hearing aids and listened, waiting to have their hearts broken again. All right, thank you. So that one more fairy tale style. There's not a lot of characterization happening. The project I'm working on now is a short story collection I think I'm going to call Chant, which is very similar to Electricity and Other Dreams. They're Southern stories, they're magical, they're fabulous. But instead of having the distant fairy tale third-person narrator, I wanted to get really close to character and write every line of the story if possible in their own voice, and use a lot of those tricks of character that I talked about during the craft lecture today. So the story I'm about to read next is called Ghost Jeep. And this will be the final one. So Ghost Jeep, here we go. We have a 90s model Jeep Cherokee, green and dirty and banged up so bad, only the driver's side door is open. We don't have a windshield no more, but we never needed it. We have piles of scratch CDs of pirated albums. We have a system in the back, big speakers booming up and down these cracked country roads like a low-flying bomber. We have been 16 and riding around the same small town since the night we died 20 years ago. There are three of us. We have each other, but every year we lose a little more until we can't remember our names. The town is changing, but we can't change. We can't drive down the new highway, can't go into new stores, can't pick up new radio stations. But we go to all the old places, even the ones that don't exist anymore. From their porches rising over thick summer lawns, our old classmates sit outside in the evenings and watch our wrecked Jeep slide up and down the roads. They listen to its shriek of bent metal and thump of bass. Seeing us makes them gloat to be alive, but they never leave the town either, and they are the same as when they were kids. They might as well be ghosts too. For weeks, someone new has been watching. A girl waits by the road for us to pass. We don't see her there in the dark until our lights slide over her. She reminds us of the car that came around a curve and slammed into us, there like a flash of lightning, and then everything we'd hoped for was gone. The strange girl waves for us to stop, but we have only a few hours of dark left. We take one of us to the house where her boyfriend lived, and she goes around looking in all the windows and yelling through the door. No one lives there now, not after 20 years of hauntings. One of us wants to see the house where his crush once lived, but he doesn't even get out of the car, just stays parked on the side of the road and looks from his window. People still live in that house, not noticing his shy haunting. After a while, he gets embarrassed and we leave. One of us wants to go to the house where he lived as a kid, but everything is different now. The house chopped up, expanded, remodeled. It isn't the same place and he can't go inside. He walks around the yard and calls to his old dog for hours until the sky begins to brighten, but that dog is deader than we are. The girl slings a hail of gravel against the side of our Jeep to see if we are solid. It tins against the fenders of the ghost car, falls in our laps and rolls into the floor. We slam on the brakes and stop a few yards past her, the red eyes of our taillights burning on the asphalt and music buzzing like a hornet. She grabs the door handle and pulls, trying to get in. "Tell us whose kid you are," we say through the missing windshield. "We'll tell you every awful thing your parents ever did." "My family just moved here," the girl says. "What do people say about us after 20 years?" The girl shrugs. "I don't know." She tries the door handle again, barely pulling at the metal, and we feel her need run all through us. One of us slides over to make room and waves for the girl to go around to the other door. She gets in and we gun the engine. The sun will come up soon, and then we will go wherever we go. New girl or not, we have all our old things to do. Tell us who your friends are, one of us says. We know about them. I don't know many people. She has to shout over the music, the speakers vibrating the backs of our heads. I guess everyone knows Donnie Rosenbaum. He's an asshole, though. So was his dad. Who else? She names a few more kids she doesn't like, all of them copies of their parents. But who are your friends? We want to know who she stands next to at lunch, which houses she spends the night at, whether she hangs out at the mall or the theater or the basketball courts. We want to file her away with the people we know so that we can hate her too, tell her that she's just like everyone else, that we don't want her in our Jeep. We grind our teeth like a sawmill and wait. The girl pretends not to hear us, just looks out the window at the passing trees. So where are we going, she asks. We're going to Skip Rocks, one of us tells her. We turn off the road and bounce over a cattle guard, riding into someone's pasture. There's a clay and gravel track that takes us to what was once a big pond, wide enough for skipping rocks. It's been drained now, just a dry clay bed cracked and dotted with our white stones, but we can still see the ghost of water. We aim our headlights at the middle of the pond, kill the music, and start looking for skipping stones. We throw rocks and count their skips over the water that isn't there anymore, finally watching them make their slow drop to settle on the bed. The girl picks up a rock and throws, but hers falls through the air and tumbles across the ground. She watches us hurl our rocks until we run out. We lean back against the Jeep and don't know what to do with ourselves, much less her. The girl walks down into the low place, along the beam of our headlights. We watch her bend and pick up good flat stones, putting them in her pockets. When she gets far out in the middle where the lights barely reach and her shape becomes murky, we remember the time one of us almost drowned. We can't see her anymore. We shout for her to be careful, and for a moment we all remember how it feels to lose something. Then she comes up, dry and alive, and back into our light across the pond, carrying piles of flat rocks in her hands. There's a flash of headlights and another car turns down the road and parks beside us. It's the sheriff's deputy, and more than we hate anyone else in town, we hate cops. The girl steps closer to one of us, trying to blend in. Don't tell him I'm not dead, she whispers. I don't want to go home. The policeman grins and walks around our Jeep. Don't stop what you're doing, he tells us. I'm just curious. What keeps this thing going? His fingers feel around for the latch under the hood, and there is something hungry about him. We have nothing at all, and he wants to take it. The girl throws a stone and breaks the window on his police cruiser. When he turns around, we press close to her, all of us throwing our rocks. He tries to grab one of us, but his hands pass right through. No one can touch us if we don't want, and we never want. We get back in our car and turn up the music, sling gravel and peel out. He pulls onto the road after us, switches on his lights and sirens. We smash down old roads with abandon, the car weaving in and out of the ditch, careening through stop signs, driving on the wrong side of the road. He is too worried about staying alive to keep up with us. The girl holds the back of the seat, mouth open, grateful and terrified. The sun is almost up and we take the girl toward home. I don't want to go back, she says. No one is there anyway. Do you have an aunt or grandma or something? We remember having families, places to go. They live too far away. You'll have to make friends with someone at school, we say. On the porches, with the sun yellowing the edges of the sky, people are still sitting out to watch us and reminisce about their old lives. Can't you be my friends, she asks, looking at the floor. It's daytime, we say. We can't bring you with us. We drop her off and watch her go inside. There are no cars in her driveway, and we worry about her, not used to the feeling. The sun comes up and we evaporate like water. It feels like sleeping, and we are always a little hopeful. But then it's night again, and we're back, like always. The next night, the girl is waiting for us again. She is soaked with rain, like she's been standing for hours so she wouldn't miss us. She opens the door and climbs over one of us to get in. We want something special for her, so we get on the interstate and head to the next town, 45 minutes away, just like we used to. Are people at school mean to you, we ask, because we can haunt them. They aren't mean, she says, but they aren't nice either. They already had everything they needed before I moved here. We're blowing past cars on the interstate, threading in and out of traffic. She asks where we're going. There's a movie theater and a bowling alley one town over. Didn't that shut down a long time ago? We live in the past, we tell her. When we pull up to the theater, there are no lights, and tall lines of vines have fissured the parking lot. The building burned down and was never rebuilt, but rising past the charred walls is the ghost of the building as it was when we were alive. Can you see it? We ask her. No, she says. It's just an empty lot. One of us digs in the car for a pair of our old sunglasses and gives them to her. When the girl puts them on, the building hangs over her like a cathedral. Inside, it seems real, like our Jeep. The only tell is that the building smells like burned wood, and there's a faint haze of smoke in the air. We take the girl through the deserted lobby and have our pick of the theaters. The movies are old, and we've seen them all before, but the girl sits grinning with the decades-old projector light on her face. We watch her and feel what she feels, emotions we lost a long time ago and can't name. We watch movies all night, then race against the dawn to get her back before we vanish. We wonder if she wanted us to forget, to leave her stranded far from home. With our music rattling shards of glass out of our windows, broken pieces that fall endlessly, the girl leans over the console and asks how we died. There isn't much to tell. We were coming around a corner of road one night, too fast and not paying attention. A girl in a silver SUV wandered onto the wrong side of the road while she adjusted her stereo. When we came around the curve, she hit us like a cannonball. The girl flew through her windshield and landed in the ditch, but her SUV tore a hole through us, smashing the front of our car and throwing us off the road, our Jeep rolling until it was crushed from all sides. That's sad, the girl says. There's more, we tell her. The first person to arrive was the sheriff. The girl in the SUV was his daughter, and everyone in town loved her. People didn't have any use for us, except as things to push and prod when they were bored. Quick to fight and chronically angry, we were spectacle for them, just like now. So when the first ambulance came, the sheriff had them take his daughter, even though she was conscious and wasn't bleeding much. These three can wait on the next one, the sheriff said. But that ambulance was 40 minutes away, and he knew it. The EMTs and the other cops didn't say anything. They took his daughter away and left us bleeding in our Jeep. By the time the second ambulance came and the paramedics started pulling us out of the wreckage, we were dead. I would have been angry, she says. We are angry, but mostly we're hurt. On the way back to her house, the girl tries to cheer us up by telling us about new things, new songs, new movies, wars far away that started before we died, but which we are surprised to learn still haven't ended, violent visions acting themselves out forever, ghosts like us. When we drop her off, it's nearly light and we are disappearing with the gray disk of the moon. Tomorrow is the anniversary of the day we died, we tell her. Stay home. No matter what, don't get in the Jeep with us. She watches us disappear and we are sad because already we know what she's planning. When we reappear, it's the same summer night that killed us all over again. We are eaten up with it like battery acid. We comb splintered glass out of our hair, touch our broken noses and collapsed chests, feel weightless with all the blood we've lost. The Jeep rattles worse than usual, and strange deformations of its body press us tight. One of us riding in the front passenger side twists sideways from the fender curling in against him. The Jeep shouldn't run, and we shouldn't be here. The sheriff shouldn't have left us in the ditch for his daughter. Our parents shouldn't have moved away and left us alone. Nothing is fair, not living or dead. We blast our music and tear up the roads. The girl stands by her driveway and throws rocks at us, but we don't stop. When we come back down her road, she's standing in the middle of the highway. We want to blast right through her, empty as air, but the Jeep slows down. We don't have control of the car anymore, and this night will end like it always has. The girl climbs in. Where are we going? She only sounds a little afraid. Don't act like you don't know, one of us tells her. The Jeep slices down that old curve, back and forth. People watch us from their houses, but they know what day it is and don't dare get on the road. Our tires slip into the ditch for a moment, touch dirt and grass, pull back up onto the highway. The horn blares over the music. Anytime the Jeep slows to make a turn, we push the girl toward the door. Get out, please go. I want to be one of you, she says. We have a tank that never runs out of gas. We have miles of curving highway and hours of night. We have everyone we care about in the Jeep with us. We have this bad thing that happened to us a long time ago, and we pick at it like a scab, looking at it again and again from every angle, and we will never be satisfied with how it ends. The engine roars like an animal, and the Jeep goes faster and faster along the curve. A pair of headlights appear, disappear way down the road. We meet the car around the same curve, and our ghost Jeep and ghost bodies glide through it without leaving a scratch. That's how it's always happened before, smashing into a car and throwing ourselves in the ditch again, leaving whatever person we hit alive and confused but unhurt. But that was before we picked up a living girl. When our Jeep sweeps through the car, the girl smashes through the windshield, bounces through the cab, and exits the back glass, hitting a bank of dirt hard enough to leave an indentation, a dark-haired teenage comet falling to ground. The car stops on the side of the road, and the driver calls someone on his cell phone. "I think I hit a deer," he says. "I'm fine. Everything is fine." Our Jeep is tossed into the ditch like always. We climb from the wreckage and check on the girl. She breathes shallow, is lying there wrong, like people aren't supposed to lie. Her hair is over her face, and we're afraid to touch her. One of us runs to the man on his phone. "Call an ambulance," we tell him. "I know you," he says, "the ghost kids. You hurt my car. Why call an ambulance? You're already dead." We try to explain, but he is nervous and drives away. We are alone with the girl. The Jeep is satisfied after having relived the crash, and we can take it where we need again. We load the girl into the back seat, our palms like air on her twisted back, and drive fast for the hospital. We would try CPR, but we have no breath to give. The hospital was built after we died, so we can't go inside. We leave the girl in the grass as close as we can get to it and shout for help. A couple of nurses smoking outside the door see us, put out their cigarettes, and walk back in. We know them. They went to school with us. Walking around the hospital and looking in all the windows, we see that it's full of people we know. Here they are, the whole damn town that failed us. The girl lies like a stone on the grass, our Jeep shivering beside her. We circle the hospital and scream at all the windows, like we have so many times before. Through one window, we see the sheriff's daughter. She's a doctor now. Deep in her heart, we know there's lodged a piece of guilt thick as window glass, and she works doubles every day trying to pull it out. When she sees us, she starts to cry. Some nights we follow her all over town, giving her no peace and not letting her forget for a second why she is alive. We shout for her to save the girl. She can't hear us through the glass, and she doesn't understand. Like always, she mouths, "It wasn't my fault. I didn't want this." "Stop defending yourself," we shout. We're afraid we will lose the girl like we've lost everything except our 20-year-long grudge. "Help her," we mouth. She is looking at us, but she doesn't understand. We float in the light and make promises. We will forgive you for living instead of us. We will stop haunting you if we can. Just this once, we beg the doctor, the people we grew up with, their sons and daughters. Just this once, hear us. The sheriff's daughter can tell something is different. She leaves her office and starts down the hall. We see her through the hospital doors, coming down the long hallway to meet us. The nurses try to stop her, telling her that she doesn't have anything to apologize for. She pushes through them and walks out the door. We open our mouths and hover near the girl, but dawn has come, and the light breaks us apart like droplets of dew. She walks up to us with hands out, ready to listen. We vanish, having so much left to say. Thank you. So good on time?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Very good. Actually, we can now maybe take questions.
Yeah, questions would be great.
Okay, I got a question.
All right.
All right. First of all, that last story.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much, can they really see ghosts, or what did they imagine they do?
In my thinking, we kind of talked about this before, how like when you put a story out into the world, like whatever a reader gets out of it, you know, like that's it. So like whatever way you take it is yours. My intention, I guess, with these is that the magic is always real. Like it's never like a metaphor or a hallucination. Like nobody's on drugs, nobody's having a dream. It's just like they're actual ghosts and actual mermaids and stuff. So cool, great, good question though. I think there were a couple other people over here. Yeah.
I got a chance to start reading a fabulous book between the last.
Oh, thank you.
This one, and I want to know, what is your affiliation with the military?
Oh, neat. My dad was in the Army, so I grew up on Army bases. And for probably like the first, until I was about 12 or 13 years old. We grew up on Army bases, so like moving every few years. And a lot of my cousins are in the Air Force. My brother, I think, is in the Air Force Reserve. My dad, I probably would have went in the military too, except my dad told me he'd kill me if I did, so I should do something else. But yeah, coming from like in where I'm from, like poor rural Southwest Arkansas, like I think the best ticket out of poverty for a lot of people is just to join the Army. And it definitely, benefited my family in a big way. So that's cool that you picked up on that. Oh, cool. That's really awesome. And then back there.
In your writing process, how, I don't know if long's the right word, but when you have so many images, like unique images like lantern eyes and watermelon dripping into his diaper and stuff, like how much of that is in your revision process and how much of it is just like comes out while you're writing?
I would say probably like 3/4 of it is probably the revision process. I often start my stories with like a striking image, like there's an interesting and I think poets often do this too. They get like a really neat image and they build the poem around that. And I often do that for fiction. But yeah, a lot of those, like you write them the first time and go back and look at them and they're cliches, or you've used the same language to describe everything over and over and over. So you have to work really hard to vary up your language and find new ways to describe things. So most of that's revision, like just reading the story out loud with a pen in my hand and saying like, this sentence is dumb. I have to do something else. But yeah, that's a good question too. Yeah.
Do you have any techniques for writer's block? Because I know stories like this could probably get a little overwhelming at times.
Yeah. So I think for me, the best way, there are different schools of thought on this. I don't typically get blocked. I know a lot of people when they get blocked or they get stuck on a story, they just walk away from it. They feel like, well, I don't need to force this, I'll go do something else. I don't like doing that. And since I do a lot of like outlining and free writing and brainstorming, if I get stuck on a story, I'll do one of two things. Either I'll start outlining a new story and kind of brainstorming, or I'll just keep working on the other. I think often writer's block is actually, you put down sentences and you see that they're bad, and so you don't want to keep writing. You're like, it's not that you can't physically put words on paper, it's that the words are bad. And you're like, well, this is junk and I don't want to do this. But often if you just force yourself to write through the junk, you'll end up pulling out of it and coming up with good stuff. I think, to me, it seems very hard to get better ideas if you're not actually writing. Like if you're not spending time working with words, like how are you going to get better ideas? So often I'll like obsessively like re-outline stories over and over, or I'll free write, I'll like make up a bunch of different lines, or I'll just keep. Recently there was a story I was working on and I could not get the first page to work right. But it was going to be the only day I had for several weeks to write because I had a lot of stuff coming, and I knew, well, I either write today or I don't get to write for a month. So I sat there and I wrote a page and I deleted it, and I wrote a page and I deleted it, and I wrote a page and deleted it, and finally I got to a paragraph that didn't seem quite so much like hot garbage like the rest of it. And I was like, well, maybe I can work with this, and it got so much better after that. But I think for me, throwing myself into it and just forcing it is good for a lot of people. They need to get away from it and do something else. Often too, like whatever makes you love stories and whatever you're excited about, if you're really excited about superhero movies or something, and you just go watch a movie, it'll kind of replenish you creatively and you'll feel better. So often engaging with stories in like a happy, fulfilling way where you're like, this is why I write stories, this is what I love, like can help recharge you a little bit too. A great question. Yeah.
Have you ever thought about making any of your stories visual?
Like a film or something, or a film.
Pictures or something?
Yeah, I wish I was an artist. I'm jealous of people who can draw. There was a while I was thinking about trying to make animated, stop motion animation, but that's really hard and labor intensive too. I feel like it's something I would love to do, but have not had a chance to work on yet. I have been lucky enough to work with some artists who have done like illustrations based on my work, and that's always been really fulfilling and neat. But on my own, I guess I feel like there's probably not much I can do with that. I just don't have that set of skills. But yeah, always exciting when that stuff happens. And then you had another one also.
Your story, is it inspirational? Like, does it pertain to anybody, or does it just come straight from the dome?
Oh, like am I basing it off like real life people or something? Yeah, generally a little bit of it is going to come from like I feel like you can't escape where you come from, right? So like a lot of my stories deal with the rural South. Like occasionally I'll have a story set in Georgia or set in Kansas or somewhere. It's really Arkansas still. I just like get tired of like writing about Arkansas all the time. I'm like, I'm going to make this one Georgia. Nobody will know. It's still, it's the same stuff. But so I'll take like kind of the stuff of my childhood or like anything that has happened to me, people I know, but also like often writing is responding to other stories and responding to other books. So when I wrote Ghost Jeep, part of it is just thinking about what other ghost stories have I read and how do they work, and how am I different from those other ghost stories? Because I don't want to tell the same story somebody else has already told, right? But a lot of this actually comes from, there's like little bits and pieces buried in here that if my friends from high school read, they would probably be like, well, that was my old Jeep, and we used to listen to music like that. And yeah, we were really angry at everybody too, like. So some small part of it is definitely me, but I try really hard to make up as much as I can. And I really like writing about characters who are not like me personally, because there are a lot of writers who do really great work doing more autobiographical fiction. But I feel like I'm just not that exciting of a person. I just kind of sit and read and write all the time, and there's nothing really, interesting about that. So I like writing about like more interesting people usually. Good question. Yeah.
Hey, I think when we're all writing, we all find ourselves drawn to like a certain element, or we're more comfortable writing in a certain style. What drew you to magic realism of all things?
Growing up as like when I first started loving books and reading, it was all fantasy novels, sci-fi novels, like magical sorts of things. I didn't actually read a lot of that, so I didn't read Tolkien until I was an adult. I didn't read C.S. Lewis until I was adult. But like for living in like I'm sure many of you are probably from rural places, like out in the middle of nowhere too, like coming from Georgia. So my bookstore as a kid was Walmart, and they didn't have a lot, but they had like these paperback fantasy novels, so that's what I was reading. And I loved fairy tales, and what I came to love in those stories was this like sense of wonder where everything in the world was kind of amazing and startling and interesting just because of what it was. And so later on, when I started trying to write more literary fiction, I always wanted to try to keep that, part of my stories too. I have written a few realist stories, but I don't enjoy writing those as much. Like definitely my heart's more in this. And there are writers like Latin American magical realist writers like Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Isabel Allende, who often write magical stories that take place in the present day about people who are kind of poor and live in rural places. And I feel like reading those authors when I was about 18 or 19 really taught me how to write and like what I wanted to do, how I could sort of marry where I came from with the kinds of wondrous stories I was interested in. Yeah, great.
Why did you name this collection of stories Electricity and Other Dreams?
So that's a great question. It's similar to like kind of her thing about like why am I interested in magic and stuff. So one of the things I'm trying to do with these magical realist stories is take the real world and pair it with something like strange and magical, because I think mixing those things is really fun. So like I think I gave kind of a gross example in the other lecture that I won't give again. But if you see like a dragon in a fantasy story or something like that, is like okay, that's not really surprising. But if there's a dragon like in your kitchen like making eggs or something, that's a little weird. Like that's a little worth noting. So with the title Electricity and Other Dreams, I was sort of taking something ordinary that's around us all the time, and then something that's maybe a little more mystical or like dreamy, right? Like so something that's more magical and something that's more mundane, and putting them together. Because I think like putting them together, it makes like dreams seem more magic seems ordinary, and things like electricity seem magical. So in one of the stories in the collection that literally happens, there's like an electrician, and light is magic, and whatever it touches changes things. Yeah. Cool. It was a long answer to your question. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Did you write as a child, and if so, how has your style has developed?
Mm-hmm.
What types of things did you write?
Yeah, I can't remember a time I didn't write stories or make up stories. Like stories have always been my favorite thing, my favorite hobby, and what I've been most interested in. So what kinds of stories did I used to write? The oldest story that I have that my mom still keeps, and I wish she would throw away, and I have no idea how old I was when I wrote it, is about like a werewolf who eats a bunch of people on Earth, and they get tired of that, so they put him in a rocket and send him to the moon, and then he eats everybody on the moon, and that's the end of the story. And I would probably still write that now. I don't know. Like, yeah, I've probably always been interested in weird, magical, strange things. I like pop culture a lot. In the craft lecture today, I talked a lot about. I had like literary stuff. I talked about Wendell Berry and Lauren Groff and James Baldwin and people like that. But more than that, I probably talked about Harry Potter and superheroes and things. So I've always been interested in pop culture sort of stuff. So how has it changed? I think the biggest change is between the two stories. These were actually both written pretty close together, Song Beneath the City about the plumbers and Ghost Jeep. But one of the changes I'm making now is trying to write more in the voice of characters, like collapse that narrative distance. So instead of a far away storybook narrator telling you what's happening, it's just this like angry person telling you what happened to them. And I think that's a lot of fun, and they're maybe a little more fun to read sometimes. So it's something I'm exploring now. I don't know how long I'll be doing that, but I'm definitely doing a book of short stories right now that plays with that sort of thing. You had a question? Yeah.
Have you ever kept a dream journal or any other sort of writing journal?
No, not a dream journal. I don't think I've ever. Usually when I have a dream that I think would be a good story and I wake up in the middle of the night and try to write it down, it just doesn't even make sense the next morning. It's like, what was I even doing? It felt so important at the time. So no, I haven't had much luck with it. There is a sci-fi writer that I used to like a lot when I was younger, and he says that he falls asleep at night like thinking about stories, and he'll just repeat lines in his head, and as he's asleep he'll like repeat these lines over and over and over, and when he wakes up in the morning he'll just write out a story. And I think that's weird and can't like I don't know what that doesn't sound like that's good for you, but some people like do more of that sort of thing. I think my process is not very magical. It's just very like wadding up lots of sheets of paper and taking lots of notes and outlining things. It's all very very thinky and mechanical. There's not a lot of like mystical or fun to it. I mean, it's fun. I like doing it, but not in that way.
How long would you say a story does it take you to write it from conception to finalization?
When life is not beating me up really hard and making me do a lot of things, and when I'm not like so busy I don't have time to write, I usually write a story a week. I started doing that when I was a master's student. I thought I wanted to have a lot of stories written, and it seemed like for every 10 stories I wrote, maybe 5 or 6 of them were just junk. 2 or 3 of them were maybe good, and one of them was actually kind of like something I could work with and send out. So I try to write a lot of stories knowing that I'll have to throw a lot of them away. So at my best, I try to write a story a week when I don't have anything else going on. And usually I'll spend about a day outlining and making notes, and then once I have the plot really set, then I'll write it on another day. And then I'll spend 2 or 3 days revising it or something. And then it's very circular too, because you think a story's done and you send it out into the world, and then the world throws it right back. And you're like, okay, that one wasn't done. Let's read that again. And then you see all of the mistakes in it that you didn't see before when you were too close to it. So I can write one and get it out into the world in a week or a week and a half. But sometimes they'll bounce back, and I'll revise them and keep working on them, and it'll be years before anything happens with them. Yeah, and sometimes they get picked up very fast, so it just depends. Any final questions? Okay, well, thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate you being here. Yeah.